All right, hey everybody. I'm hoping that you're all doing great. We have somebody very amazing from the team, from the Litmus family. We have Ishan. Ishan had a great run this season, wherein Ishan got a 99.97 percentile in CAT. Yes, you heard it right. It's a 99.97 is what Ishan had gotten this season, and we are going to understand from him as to what did he do to actually get such a percentile. That is number one. And then we're also going to talk about the interviews, because there are a lot of amazing calls that he's already converted, and there are some amazing calls that we are waiting for as well. Ishan, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sudhanshu. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ishan. It's great to have people like you, who keep pushing us also in terms of working hard and pushing our own limits in terms of helping students even better. So, Ishan, let me quickly start with your journey. But before that, if you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah. So my family is from UP, but most of my upbringing has happened in Maharashtra, more specifically Pune, which is where I went to high school. I had the science branch in high school. And after that, I made a kind of unconventional, controversial decision to go abroad for my bachelor's. So I did my bachelor's from the United States, where I studied statistics and liberal arts. After that, I think around August, I came back to India and have been preparing since then to get into a B school in India. I'm also a fresher without any full time work experience, though I've had some internship experience and I was a part of a research lab at my university.
Okay. So, Ishan, before I get into your journey, do you think that the degree in statistics has been helpful in any manner to the CAT preparation and the MBA preparation at large?
Yeah, I think it played a role in how familiar I was with a lot of the quant concepts. I think being comfortable with numbers, it certainly had a part to play. Beyond that, stuff like handling data and just working with data, visualizing data, I think you're probably likely to have a decent grasp on it through statistics. But at the same time, yeah, like a lot of the concepts that we covered in the bachelor's degree weren't really necessarily the topics that were there in CAT. So beyond just kind of brushing up your aptitude and giving you kind of a familiarity with generally working with numbers, I think, yeah, it had that kind of a role to play.
Yes. Ishan, being a part of the preparation and the thought process, you started very late. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about it. Why did you start late? Why didn't you start early? What was the thought process?
Definitely, yeah. So I was in the US till August, right? And after that, I came in August, and I kind of knew that I wanted to continue my pursuits back in India. And I had an idea that I'm not going to go into a technical heavy field. I'm not going to do an MS. And for like the corporate world, the best option seemed to be an MBA. So I started looking into like the paths, what kind of exams I could give and where I could go potentially. And of course, SCAT was the first thing to come up there.
And Ishan, if we talk about what was actually inside that plan, what did you actually do during that point in time?
Right. So, as I already mentioned, like it was just 2.5 months, which is quite a small amount of time compared to what people conventionally spend. Because of that, I did not really go topic by topic. I did not like cover the substance chapter by chapter. Instead of that, my primary focus in the preparation was mock tests. I think that played a key role in me being prepared for test day and not getting the nerves on test day itself. I would do my best to give a mock hopefully every single day, if not every other day. And beyond the mock, I would go through the video solutions for all the questions I got wrong and also the ones that I skipped. That played a crucial role in my journey, kind of helped me familiarize myself like with the mock process. And by the end of it, I had, I'd say, over 30 mocks under my belt, at which point it was much easier to keep my cool in the exam on the day itself.
Absolutely. Beyond mocks, in fact, you talked about going through the mocks and then analyzing in terms of what is it that you're not getting right in that mock, right? Apart from mocks, is there anything major that you took care of in terms of, let's say, being calm and composed in the process, and is there anything else apart from mocks that you did? Because obviously, mocks is one part of it, but beyond that, do you think anything that you did from a concept standpoint? Let's say मैंने एक question किया, वो क्वेश्चन मेरा गलत हो गया, एंड देन मुझे रियलाइज हुआ कि यार ये तो कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं आता है, सो देन मे बी आई गो बैक एंड स्टडी दैट कॉन्सेप्ट. हाउ डिड यू गो अबाउट इट? मतलब डिड यू गो बैक टू स्टडी द कॉन्सेप्ट्स और नो?
So in all honesty, like the area where I could have used that was probably quants, which was also like my lowest out of the three sections comparatively. But personally, I did not really go back on that. What I did the most, like in terms of familiarizing, was kind of knowing the time frames to work with, how much time you kind of get an understanding of how much time you can allocate, let's say per set or per RC, etc. Uh, so I didn't really devote time to go back and kind of learn a concept from scratch. But within kind of the concepts that I had somewhat of at least a peripheral understanding of, optimizing for the specific kind of questions that come in the CAT, I think that was like primarily what I did.
Understood. Understood. So you were focusing more on the execution.
Yes.
Correct. So, Ishan, let me ask you this. If you could bring out, let's say, a few pointers in terms of the exam strategy, okay,
Mhm.
which can be, let's say, useful for all the people who are going to take CAT 2025, what would those pointers be?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I have some pointers for each of the three sections. Starting with VARC, I'd suggest to anybody who has a decent to good grasp of English itself to attempt every single question if they can get through like the entire section in time in their mocks. I think it's kind of crucial. For me personally, for instance, I knew that I was better off gambling on getting a question wrong than being certain that my guess would be wrong. So, like the risk trade off there would have always been to attempt a question and get it wrong if I do, and I think that paid off for me at the end of the day. Beyond that, I kind of aimed for reading an entire RC section within like 5 minutes or so, and spend around 7 to 8 minutes per RC set. Right. One key takeaway that I kind of learned across my journey for VRC was that you kind of have to forget what you already know. When you're reading the RCs, you don't go in with like the knowledge base that you currently have.
Correct.
Every answer that you answer has to be derived from the passage itself. So try to look for like explicit directions given in the passage that lead to an answer rather than something that you think might intuitively make sense. That part was a little bit of a struggle because you tend to kind of answer the question based on your perception of it, but it has to be straight out of the book.
Correct.
Beyond that, for the summaries, I'd say try to find a pretty straightforward answer. One that's not complicated usually tends to be the right answer. So those are some pointers for VARC that I had. As for my strategy for DILR, what I initially would do was I would scan through all of the four sets and find the two sets that I would find the easiest, right? And try to get those 10 done before maybe attempting a third one if I did have the time. In the day of the exam itself, there were actually 5 sets. And funnily enough, this strategy wasn't really something I stuck to because I only left 3 questions in the section and got 19 correct. But usually my go-to was to aim to have 2 sets down, and any of the type in the answer questions I would definitely answer because those have no negative marking. So on the small off chance that you can get it right, that's great. Beyond that, I would encourage you to chart out the data as you read the set that you've decided to do on the paper itself. Try and find a way where you can kind of have everything visually laid out in front of you in a way that's easy to understand and not too cluttered. And while you're doing so, try to make all of the inferences from all of the data points as you go. One of the biggest time killers during the DILR is going back to the same data point to try and understand like how that would fit in. Right. Something that like I'd struggle with a lot is kind of rereading it again and again. That eats up too much of the time. So try and establish everything from the data points as you're reading the set. With that DILR you should have in hand. And if you can get 10 or more questions, I think that's a great attempt. Beyond that, for QA, speed was crucial. So QA was, of course, this section that was the least reliable for me, and speed was a huge factor here. So from the get-go, by the time I reached the test day itself, I kind of had a grasp of which topics I were to skip. So let's say APGP, right, or some geometry question, unless it was very straightforward, I would pretty much instantly skip it. So I kind of had an idea of what kind of questions I would not bother attempting at all. Beyond that, if a question took way too long, right, I would mark it for review and move on because you'd rather risk coming back to it. The main reason I would do all this is because in quite a few of the mocks early on, right, I would get to, let's say, question 18 out of 24 and get a so and so mark. But later on, when I look through the questions itself, 20 to 24 might be four of the easiest questions in the set. So you cannot really afford to have any question be unseen. Because of this, you kind of have to strategize on where you're really spending time, and you don't just have sets like you do in DILR. So on a question by question basis, and if you can on a topic by topic basis, you should kind of know what you want to attempt and go through the entire section ideally quickly so that even if you have some time remaining, you can go back to what you'd marked for review. Beyond that, for test day itself, I would say when you're going to give the exam, you have to walk in completely believing that you can do it. No matter what, no matter how badly your last mock went, you have to have it in your head that you are going to get the score that you're aiming for. Because if you do not, you're kind of already putting yourself down in that race. Uh, Keeping that composure throughout the exam, even if you mess up a set, even if some questions don't make sense to you, you have to have that faith throughout that you're gonna ace it.
Absolutely. So, Ishan, did you have bad score in mocks?
Oh, definitely. It was a huge range, especially in DILR where it's you never know what kind of section, like what kind of sets you're gonna get. The lowest I scored in DILR was actually like a 3 or a 6, something like that, which was of course completely different from like the 50 whatever I scored in the final exam, right? And one of the last few mocks even that I gave, I ended up scoring like around a 60 70 total, which was like less than half of what I got in the actual exam, right? So there will be variation. The key point is to not let yourself be demotivated regardless of that, and try and assess where your weak points were, but know that it's a journey and each mock test is different. Each um, coaching institute that makes the mocks is different and their difficulties vary, so try and keep your head up throughout that process.
That sounds great. And Ishan, if I talk about, let's say, the composure inside the exam hall,
Mhm.
if you would want to talk a little bit about that also, how do you, keep your head cool? If something is not happening, it really kills the composure in many of the cases. So how do you go about that?
But definitely, I've heard many such cases of people who've been doing great in mocks, and on the day
Yes.
of the exam itself, it's
Yes.
all unraveled. I think the main thing that makes people lose composure is maybe seeing time run out, having a sense that they're not going to be able to finish everything within the time frame. I think once you're under that pressure, you start performing worse even with the time that you have in hand. So you really need to nail, like it needs to be second nature to have these kind of check marks throughout the 40-minute period for each section, where you have a certain amount of expectation for each of those check marks, which let's say for VARC was 7 to 8 minutes per set for me, right? And have the faith that as long as you're following that timeline, that you'll have plenty of time left towards the end. You need to learn to let go. If you do not have a question, let's say in QA, if there was a question maybe that you thought would have been easy but you spent too much time and you don't get it, you need to understand that's 3 marks. If you get it wrong, it's 4 marks, that's gone. You cannot scrap the 4 or 5 questions after that just because of that. So kind of need to have a big picture view throughout the exam and hope to do your best within that 2 hour period.
That sounds great. And Ishan, obviously we've spent some months together in terms of the interview preparation. So
Mhm.
how would you want to put it in terms of interviews? Now, let's say for people who clear their exams, they get good scores. What would you tell them in terms of interview preparation?
Right. So the interview preparation is, funnily enough, like the least certain part of all of this. Once you are finished with your cat, and in the months of January to February, you'll be elated with all the interview calls you're getting. But once you actually start the process, you'll realize that the cat preparation was actually a cakewalk. You'll kind of wish for those days back because it's much more straightforward. With the interview, it can really be anything. First and foremost, I would say get your speaking practice out. Try to give as many mocks as you can. Try to converse with people in English in any opportunity that you can, right? Maybe in a setting where you have a little bit of pressure on you. This would help boost your fluency. And for better or for worse, they do heavily judge on your communication skills. So you
Absolutely.
want to try and have that be as good as possible. Beyond that, for my interviews, there were basically 3 areas that the interviews can kind of ask you questions on. One of them is HR, right? Which is the basic questions that you have to have down. Why you're doing an MBA? Tell me about yourself. How your field of study will help you in your MBA, right? Why you're switching from a job, let's say. These kind of questions that you can kind of standard expect any interview to have. It's not necessarily they'll ask all of them, but these are the things that are the easiest to lock down. The HR questions, the aspect of the interview where you have the most leeway like to prepare and you should have prepared the best. After that is ACADS. Especially for freshers, ACADS is going to be a pretty important aspect where questions from whatever your bachelor degree stream was. So having an overview of what you did learn, a lot of the subjects maybe in first and second year you will not really remember. I know that was certainly the case with me. So you'll have to go and brush up on all of that. With that, for instance, the MBA Litmus the guidebook that we had with the questions for statistics, right? That came really in handy. So going through all of that and being prepared with your recaps to a decent level is going to definitely help. They won't get too in depth, right? But you still have to be prepared for anything. It can definitely go in depth. And lastly is the least certain of all, and like the most with the most variation is general knowledge. There it can be literally anything. So try and know the CM of your state. Some important figures, finance minister, defense minister, etc. Those kind of questions I'm not fond of personally because I don't know how much they show about a candidate. But you need to know all of those regardless, right? Big current affairs, right? Whether it's business news, let's say a new company is doing something or something happened in the stock market. Try and know the reasons behind that. look at what news topics are coming up, whether it's geopolitics, local politics, business affairs. Uh, Whatever happens in the news is quite likely to show up, right? A lot of the interviews I've just been straight out asked what happened in the last 24 hours, right? When the union budget had come out recently, for at least 1 week, every interview transcript had some question or the
Yes.
other about what was in the union budget, pros and cons, etc. So be up to date with the news, even if you're not used to it. Try and like have, let's say, the Google tab which has all the news, and try and scroll through that whenever you can. That is a must-have. But yeah, so these three sections, more broadly, if you have them covered, you should be decently prepared for the interview. Other than that, towards the end, you may sometimes get an opportunity to ask them questions. They'll say, "Do you have any questions for us?" This, in my view, you should always prepare for, because it's a great opportunity to show how interested you are in the college itself. For this, try and prepare something niche about the college that piques your interest, and go to them with the actual question that they can give you some insight on, and that also shows that you've looked into the college itself. Let's say for IIM Calcutta, right? They asked me if I had any questions, and I asked them about the Intaglio Fest that they have, which is the biggest B school fest that they do, and more specifically, consulting nights within that. It kind of showed that I did my research. I kind of wanted to know what life would be like in Calcutta. I asked them about the finance trading hub, which is one of its kind in the country. So those kind of questions, you should have something that demonstrates your interest in the college in the question section. Beyond that, also be completely willing to admit when you do not know something. One of the mistakes I've made sometimes is trying to just answer a question. If you do not know, say you do not know, maybe ask before guessing, right? Or at least make it clear that you are taking a guess. You do not want to seem confident in a wrong answer, right? So it's
Absolutely.
always better to admit that you do not know. And one last pointer is to take your time when you're in an interview itself. This has happened to me, especially in my ISBYL interview, where you'll feel urged to answer the question as soon as they're done with it, right? You hear it and you start rattling your thoughts off from the get-go. I was told more than 2 3 times within that interview to take my time and think about it. When you're sitting there, the silence can really feel loud. You feel like there's the onus on you to start speaking as soon as possible, but that the time is going much faster in your head than it is in real life. Take a couple of seconds, take a breather, formulate your answer, think about it, because even the interviewer itself would really appreciate somebody who thinks thoroughly before answering. So I think that shows composure, and you should be willing to wait a few seconds and compose your answer.
Absolutely. So I think Ishan, that was the most comprehensive. Thank you so much for your inputs, and some final pointers, Ishan, for all the people going in for CAT 2025. Obviously we would keep calling you in and have some sessions together to help all the people who are preparing with us. But for this session, if you would want to pass on, obviously the wishes, but what are some of the pointers that you'd want to give them?
Yeah, definitely. For starters, all the best to all of you, and I hope all of you achieve all your dreams. It's going to be a decently long journey. There's going to be ups and downs. There'll be moments where you feel like you're not nearly good enough to accomplish what you're set out to do. But I would really urge you to keep your morale up. Try and have outlets that are just outside beyond of CAT as well. Do not make CAT preparation your entire life, right? Try and not have it just be a gloomy phase. For me, for instance, I actually got an actual cat for my CAT preparation, so that was a huge morale booster. But try and see the upside throughout the process. Have faith in yourself and be confident that you have what it takes. On the day of the exam, I'm sure you will do right by you.
Thank you so much, Ishan. That's Ishan, everybody. 99.97 percentile, and you were hearing his thoughts for all the people preparing for CAT 2025. Thank you so much, Ishan, for joining in. God bless you all the people watching this. To make sure that you share it with everybody who's wanting to get a great percentile this year in CAT 2025. Thank you, Ishan, for joining in. God bless, guys. We'll keep bringing in more people from MBA Litmus family who have excelled and done great in their CATs and interviews as well. Thank you so much, Ishan. God bless. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.